Welcome to the Shema Podcast and part 2 of Becoming a Spiritual Athlete with Scott Kammerman.
Welcome to the Shema Podcast, the podcast for the perplexed, where Torah insights, intertwined through personal stories as well as interviews with leading Torah scholars, demonstrate the empowering qualities of Torah and mitzvot. For more great Torah learning through Torch, the Torah Outreach Center of Houston, go to torchweb.org. Now to the show.
So, I've been here since August, but you've been here I think probably every Shabbos for how long?
I've made it a regular trip. I feel as though for a good maybe 2 years. I was doing it. It started slowly, by the way, and I'll never forget. After I went to Israel in February of 2019 on a mission, which to me it was my 10th trip to Israel in February of 2019, and I went with Rabbi Wolbe on an Aish Destiny men's mission. It was incredible, and from that point on, I started taking it upon myself to start making it a regular occurrence to come and stay by somebody in the Eruv so I could have the full experience. Because before that, I was coming to the Eruv maybe once every 3 weeks, but otherwise I was just doing it from home. I don't live in an Eruv, but I would make sure that my lights and everything were on timers. But I realized that I needed to go and take some additional steps, and so this made it much easier. And the community has been so warm and welcoming, and you in particular. It's always very nice to know that I literally have a room here with my name on it, the Scott Kammerman Suite. Even when other people end up going and staying in there, it's nice to know. But that just shows how warm and welcoming you've been to me and facilitating my commitment to keeping Shabbos regularly.
Well, we love you being here, and I'll just to give the audience a little bit of a glimpse of something about you. There was a show that I always think about, a show that was on the air called Everybody Loves Raymond. And it was so funny because if you never saw it, but the whole setting, the Raymond is married, the mom definitely shows favoritism towards him. The older brother, Robert, is annoyed by the whole thing. So in a lot of the episodes, he'll always say, "Everybody loves Raymond," with so much disdain in his heart, right? So I'm just telling the audience every Shabbos, the show I live in is called Everybody Loves Scott, because I don't care if it's 3-year-old Hadassah jumping up and down across the street that you have to go visit, or any kid, any age, everyone, every adult, they come running over to give you a hug, wish you a good Shabbos. I'm just the guy they have to move out of the way to give you a hug. And I just stand off to the side and say, "Everybody loves Scott." So it is just like there's something about you. But let's talk about something that will come up for everyone when they start observing Shabbos. And that is the challenge when you have friends or when you have your parents or siblings say, "Let's go do something. Can you meet me over here on Saturday?" And you have to begin explaining why you can't go meet with them. Talk about some of your experiences there and how you dealt with it, because I think we've both gone through the process where our families are now understanding it, but talk about that a little bit.
To your point, yes. Now my family and friends understand, they accept, and they respect that. And the positive side is that in several cases, including really with my parents, my own Shabbos observance has actually motivated them to take their own steps as well towards increased Shabbos observance, which is wonderful. But you're absolutely right. It starting off was very difficult. Especially, I grew up here in Houston. My family has been in Houston since the late 1930s. I grew up here. My family's here. My friends are here, and a lot of guys who I went to college with. And I'll never forget, a few months after I started becoming observant, as I was starting to become Shomer Shabbos, I'll never forget, there were buddies of mine who were planning on getting together to go back to my alma mater, the University of Texas, a bunch of fraternity brothers of mine, and they wanted to they're going to do a football weekend. And I had done this before in past years, and it was so much fun. And I was invited to do this. I still remember it was in the fall of 2018. I remember it very well. I still remember that I was talking, and I had to tell each of my friends when I was mentioning, I can't come in. I mean, it was going to be Friday through Sunday. And not just that, even beyond not being able to go to the game, but then, of course, everywhere that we used to eat, all the barbecue restaurants, there's like nothing I would have been able to do. And They're Jewish friends of mine who I was in a Jewish fraternity at the University of Texas. Yeah. But it was, again, obviously there wasn't the understanding. And I'll never forget one buddy of mine, when it got back to him that I wasn't going to be able to come, he tried to call me to encourage me to come. And he even said something to the extent of, "Are you going to end up coming this weekend, or are you too busy being Jewish?" I'll never forget that. And I was like, I guess I'm going to be being Jewish this weekend. But and especially after the fact, and after it takes place, or there's a bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah of friends or of friends' children that are, and I can't go. It's not really possible. Or I'll do the best I can if it doesn't conflict with Shabbos. But it's not easy. But I know deep down that I'm doing what's right, and I can't go against that. I wouldn't know how to right now. It just wouldn't sit right with me. And the fact that it doesn't sit right with me to go and break Shabbos actually makes me feel good.
Right, exactly. What I found so challenging, like my friends, my high school buddies, were the crew for life, right? Once I couldn't make the pool parties anymore, eventually the invites stopped happening, and they're not Jewish, and I really haven't connected with them since. And in all fairness, even though if they called me and wanted something, I would do it in a heartbeat. But what do we really have in common anymore now that I'm a religious Jew and they're not? So, which is fine. That those friendships serve their purpose well over the time. But where it became challenging for me was when my siblings and my parents thought that I did not value my relationship with them because I could not go on these family events, which tears my heart when that was happening, that to try to impress them, like, you are very important. It's just God and this relationship I have with him has to supersede that. And you just have to understand that it's not me, that I don't value my relationship and with my siblings and my parents. Did you have to go through any conversations like that where they felt hurt as a result of you not joining a family event? And so how did you go about talking through that?
Right. So fortunately, I don't think there was a situation where anybody was hurt. I mean, really, for most people, they didn't understand. Up until a few years ago, I mean, if it was me, I was brought up as a conservative Jew to go and believe certain things, and you think to yourself, okay, well, Shabbat it's a Saturday. Okay, great. Yeah, I'm resting. I'm going to go drive and go hang out with friends and relax. And it's a whole different reality. So it just was not really I think there was just a lack of understanding of exactly what was taking place. Nobody was really hurt. It was just a lack of understanding. And I actually had a cousin following a few years ago, following the bat mitzvah of my cousin, his daughter. His older brother actually ended up saying to me when I said I wasn't going to be able to go out to dinner. Everyone was going to drive to dinner on Friday night to wherever Friday night Shabbat dinner was going to take place at, I don't know, a Chinese restaurant or something, and all my family was going to be there. And I said, well, I'm actually heading over to the Eruv for Shabbos. And I still remember him saying to me, what, did you join a cult or something? And my response was, at that point, yes, I joined the exact same cult that our great-grandparents were a part of, and everyone before them, all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. And so I don't know if he fully got that, but it was just look, it's nice, that your family loves you because you can't join them, because you can't join your family. They wonder where you're at. They don't really understand. And what I've learned along the time of being about the Teshuvah, and I think we spoke about this as well, is you have to know when to say something. You have to know how much to say when you're explaining, because sometimes they're not going to get it no matter how you explain it. But you just have to say, look, I'm on my own journey. Just please respect that. And again, as I mentioned, my family understands that. I know that it's very nice that they express that. They mentioned that they miss me, and it does make me feel a little bad and a little sad. Here I am in Houston, where all of my family is when it comes to even a holiday, if it's a Passover or whatever, and I'm with what I regard as my family here in the community for meals and so forth, but I'm not with any of my family. All my family is across town, getting together, right, and stuff. So that's where the challenge is kind of not being with them, because I love my family and I love my friends, the friends who I grew up with. And to your point that you had mentioned about friends who you don't have a lot in common with. I don't have a lot in common these days as a result of my journey with friends of mine who are Jewish, who are Reform and conservative Jews, and that's kind of sad.
Yeah. So it's good for people beginning this to understand that is one of the complications, but it does get worked out over time. My parents, about a year and a half ago, their home flooded and they stayed with us. And so we explained to them how Shabbos works. My parents did not get it, growing up very Reform, like all these laws, and especially with keeping the kitchen kosher, and this is meat, this is dairy. They're like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? But they were very respectful, very amazing people. But I remember after that first Shabbos, or on that first Shabbos afternoon, I was sitting with my dad, and he's like, I get it. Like the whole house changed its tempo. You were busy, Sean was busy, Elsie was busy with school, and then now you guys are just hanging out and you're spending time together. He's like, I respect that. That's a great thing. And I think he's also seen it now with us being here in the school Elsie's in and what she's getting from that environment versus the public schools. So my parents do get it, but it is still a challenge when they planned my mom's 80th birthday 2 months ago, and everyone was there but us because it was over Shabbos. And so it's an ongoing pain, but I'm just letting the listeners know that you may be more like Scott, where you influence them to keep Shabbos, and maybe they'll start experiencing Shabbos with you. But that is something that will happen, but it will work out. It's all good.
And that's the satisfying goal when all is said and done, is when your family and friends understand and respect, and the real, I don't know if victory is the right word, the real triumphant feeling is when you find, as I have with some family and even some friends of mine, how they've started taking their own steps. Now, maybe they're not ready to go the full Baal Teshuva route, but they realize when all said and done that what I'm doing is not wrong and it's not bad, and they're curious and they ask questions, and in their own way they look to take their own steps. And that makes me feel really good. So because in a situation like that, just like you mentioned with regard to your father, that he respects that, when they start respecting what it is that you're doing is when their minds become open to the idea of possibly maybe exploring a little bit more. And that's all it takes, is just to not be closed-minded. The last thing I think either of us want is to have family and friends who are completely closed off from us, or choose to not have a relationship with us because they're angry with us because we've gone down this route. And while this has not happened to me, I do know people who have, it really became something very personal with their own family and friends, and they relationships, family, personal relationships, have suffered as a result of it. So it is. But to your point, and the question that you mentioned, or the issue that you posed, is the fact that that's right. Early on, in particular, it's new, and it's a matter of the people who you're most close to. You don't need to tell every single person about it. People who you're most close to, who are going to potentially wonder where you are on a weekend or over a Jewish holiday. Perhaps you're with family or friends. But if you're not going to explain to them and to let them know, of course, that you still love them, no, you're not part of a cult. You're not doing anything bad. Quite the opposite. And what's great also, I should say, is there actually are numbers of books that I've actually even given people. There's one book in particular. It's a small book I've seen over the Torch Center. There were many copies of it. It's called Jew Got Questions. And I love it because it's just something that I like to read it myself, but I've given it to a few people I know who I'm close with. And I point out to them, like, okay, here's why I'm doing certain things. Okay, it's not me. I haven't had any punch. I'm not doing anything weird or out of the ordinary here. But you have to go and explain to people slowly and give them time to understand and hopefully be open to the idea.
Yeah, I think some of the original hurt from my parents was that both their parents grew up very Reform. It was almost like, oh, Reform's not good enough for you. It was almost like I was disrespecting their parents. And what they don't understand is that, well, what about our great-great-grandparents? Because I'm doing the exact same thing they were doing. If you sort of look back, I'm actually the one glomming on to a family tradition. and in no way was intended to be disrespectful to my grandparents. But the other thing that I will say is that even though my family sort of thought too that I'm joining some cult, and that's a little crazy. Why can't Dan do this? Why can't he do that? Doesn't make any sense. But they will all say, and they have all told me, but we like cult crazy Dan a lot more than the old atheist secular Dan. So they begin to see the transformative effect of Torah. In the end, they like, well, we like the product, the output, regardless if we don't understand why you're doing these things. I think those listings, they begin to go through this. That's one of the things that will impact people, even if they don't understand why you're doing the things you're doing.
Right. And to your point, too, about when we're talking about exactly, our grandparents and our great-grandparents, it's funny, we always, everything really kind of begins, I believe, with the Baal Teshuvah, really everything, and it makes sense, because everything so much is focused in our faith around Shabbos. Shabbos is the foundation of everything. It's the fourth commandment. It's a reason. It's so important. And this is where the first major change a lot of times ends up happening. And when we start explaining to people, when I start explaining to people the importance of it, yes, I have seen that as well when it comes to older generation, because they start thinking of their own parents and grandparents who were quote unquote good people. Absolutely. But they also were not Shabbos observant the way that, generations before that all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu were.
With regard to Shabbos, as I was sort of thinking through that intro and reframing this whole idea of retribution, punishment, I started thinking about why Jews who have experienced Shabbos their whole life, why it is actually the exercise routine for humility. Because the whole idea of Shabbos is that once a week, after all your creative work and all your successes, you stop, and then all your focus is on not creating, because you are in a constant state of acknowledging that you are a creation of your Creator. And that humbling process you go through by recognizing that you don't create anything, everything you have is from Hashem, that is their training for keeping that ego in check once a week. And that's why when those of us come and we're new to it, our ego is so flabby and out of shape and big that we need some additional reinforcement to get us in line. But that's what Shabbos comes in. That Shabbos prepares us for Olam Haba.
That really becomes, I think the major exercise for the Baal Teshuvah really, first and foremost, becomes Shabbos and taking on themselves the halacha associated with Shabbos, because it's a lot. And I'm sure you remember I remember my first Shabbos experience. I stayed at Rabbi Wolbe's house, and I didn't know what to expect. I knew, I was going to shut off my phone, and I knew not to go and touch any of the lights. But other than that, I knew nothing. And it was a very surreal kind of experience. It wasn't bad. It was just new. Right. It was just different. And I felt such a sense of accomplishment after going through my first real Shabbos experience. And then I remember doing it a second time. And it's a matter of habits that are formed can be either good or bad. Right. And I think that's a big part of being a Baal Teshuvah is forming good spiritual habits. I think that's a very important thing to do. And Shabbos really affords that opportunity for a gut check with regard to everything that you were saying about the fact that, it's a day where we're not creating anything. We recognize where we stand in the world, our relationship with Hashem. It's a time to sort of take stock of the week, to be especially, or an additional, more so, a tremendous amount of gratitude to Hashem through the blessings of rest and the togetherness and the wonderful meals. And you get caught up in that, and it becomes something very special. That's why I always find it so wonderfully inspiring to know that Shabbos observance is the equivalent of 1/60th of Olam Haba. As they go and say that sleep is 1/60th of death, on the flip side, observing Shabbos is this sense of the world to come. And that's what's really amazing. And you actually get a sense of that.
It comes with challenges. It's always sort of one of my logical proofs for this idea of a Yetzer Hara, this evil entity that's influencing things, because when I would go back and I was so apprehensive about Shabbos, and then after you experience it, you're like, it was the most irrational arguments, like no phone for 25 hours. Oh, no. And then after you turn your phone off, like, I don't want to turn that back on. The emails will start piling in, all the work. Like, what am I missing out on? What am I missing out on not driving somewhere? Because it just leads to running errands. Like, there's nothing rational on why someone would say, I would not want to do this. And everyone who does it says, yes, it's a fantastic, but there's something that's blocking us, and that's why, because it's so holy. And our Yetzer Hara does not want us to experience that.
I know, I got to tell you, it's worth mentioning. The Yetzer Hara you feel every day. I know every morning. Because I'm also not in an Eruv, I know every morning I got to get in the car. I got to drive a good 15, 20 minutes to the nearest shul for morning shacharis. Same thing in the evening time. I got to go for Mincha Marv. And every single day, especially in the morning, my Yetzer Hara is giving me every reason why. Just stay in. You can put tefillin on in the afternoon before Mincha. You can sleep another 30 minutes every day. That Yetzer Hara, it really gets pushed to the limits. You really feel that Yetzer Hara, especially when you begin the Baal Teshuva route, and especially with regard to everything. And again, it's about, as we were saying over and over again, it's about developing good habits. I think when you get into the habit, the good habit of getting up, of davening every morning and davening in the evening, and Shabbos observance the way that it should be, that's a great way to keep the Yetzer Hara in check.
Right. And if the Yetzer Hara, if you're feeling this pushback from doing something that you should be doing, right, that means it's a big holy move for you. It's going to take you to a whole new level, which is why it's focusing so much effort, energy to stop you from doing that.
That's right. And it's balanced out. The feeling that one has, I can tell you, especially on an occasional morning where I just don't. I'll tell you right now, today happens to be the 4th. Well, we're observing the 4th of July. I can tell you this morning, the Shacharit service began much later at the shul that I go to, and I really was like, I don't need to today. It's a holiday, but I went, and afterwards, I always feel great. No matter if I'm getting a lot of pushback from my Yetzer Hara, or my Yetzer Hara is trying to tell me that I shouldn't do something. Once you've done the mitzvah, you've done something good. It is such a great feeling of accomplishment. It's kind of like the great feeling you get, I guess it's sort of compared many times, it's compared to when you're going to go exercise. Maybe you don't want to go for that 5-mile run, but boy, do you feel great afterwards. You want to get to that feeling there. It's just nothing like it.
Right, exactly. Let's talk about some other challenges that come up. One of the things maybe you could speak to, Scott, for those listeners who are single, is that dating and looking for the future Miss Kammerman, it takes on a whole new dynamic. Oh, yes. Once you decide, I'm religious, I keep Shabbos, I keep kosher, and I want a Jewish girl, a frum girl, a girl that's going to do this with me. It takes on a whole new dynamic. So I'll say this from my experience. In my 20s, or really growing up, it was totally acceptable, of course, to marry another Reformed Jew, and equally as acceptable to marry a Christian. Orthodox Jew, if I brought back an Orthodox Jew, that probably have raised some questions, like what is he doing? But for growing up the way we did, it was sort of like, look, we all know Judaism is made up, Christianity is made up. The only problem with a Jew and a Christian getting married is in the month of December, they run into some challenges where one wants red and green decorations and pine trees, the other wants blue and white and menorahs. But those are just problems that can be resolved with a good interior decorator. That's it. So when I would go out, it was just like anyone was a potential person for me to meet with. But it takes on, because now you're talking about really finding someone and looking at things in a much deeper, probably less superficial way. So talk a little bit about that, how the change and how that process looks from your perspective.
Yeah, well, when it came to dating for me, the most important thing for me that was always ingrained in me from my family, from my parents, is to marry somebody Jewish. That's really what it was. It didn't matter, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, someone who's Jewish. It's never been acceptable with regard to my own parents to marry anybody who's Christian. Someone who converts, no problem. So it was pretty much a wide berth there. That was what was acceptable in my family. I have gone on my own now and become a Baal Teshuva. I've now narrowed that wide berth down much more. To your point, defining someone now, it's very important. Someone to be able to go find someone who's Shomer Shabbos, Shomer Kashrus. So it's certainly not easy. And in this, what I take a lot of pride living here in Houston, being a native Houstonian, and seeing over the last 10, 15 years how this community has grown. I believe that Houston is one of the fastest growing observant Jewish communities in the country. People are flocking here from everywhere. The problem is when it comes to single Jewish women who are observant, it's harder to find them here. So I'm having to, that you talk about the challenges of it, I'm needing to look outside the neighborhood here, and it's not always easy, because not just that, sometimes you end up going and speaking to, or I go and end up sometimes I'm set up with women who have been observant their whole life, and sometimes the look when the question comes up about my own family, and my own family is not fully observant, so you become a bit of a hybrid. And so there's certain challenges there in being able to go and connect with the right person. It's not something that's easily spelled out. So I have to just challenge myself to look outside traditional norms, and when it comes to dating, to be able to go and find the right one.
Have you experienced Baal Teshuvaism? Like there's racism, sexism, anti-Semitism. Is there women who were brought up from birth? Do they have sometimes a stigma? Is there a stigma associated with being a Baal Teshuva?
It's interesting. I really have not met anybody that is outwardly that way. I think it comes down to a commonality that many times people who have been observant their entire life want to be, obviously it comes down to also a connection to the family, merging of the families as well. It's one of those things, if I do speak with someone, or when I am speaking with someone, or if somebody wants to set me up, I always go and say, are they okay with someone who's a Baal Teshuva? Because many times in observant communities, the families are able to go merge without any sort of issues at all. And I have a wonderful family here, but their level of observance is not what other observant families are. So you're talking about that's where the only kind of hesitancy I think comes into. And sometimes sometimes the questions come up as well. What's the level? Sometimes questions come up about, have you been to yeshiva? If you haven't, why not? And so forth. So sometimes you get grilled a little bit about it. And quite frankly, it makes it very easy when all is said and done. There are just some people who don't want to date Balei Teshuva. They want to go and date someone who has been, they say FFB, not BT, from birth, not Balei Teshuva. You start becoming an alphabet soup when all is said and done.
Right.
So you just make sure to go stick with the letters that people are most comfortable with.
See, I think there could be a way to reframe that, a good way of marketing it differently, because most women, and I'm saying something like I know most women, but from talk with women and maybe sort of joking around, is that when they get married, they never think, I'm excited to get married because I'm about to marry the perfect man. It's typically, I'm excited about getting married because I'm going to make him into the perfect man, right? So I hear this come up where the husband after a while says, well, I'm not a project. And it was like, yeah, you are a project. See, I would think that as a Baal Teshuva, you'd be packaged up like we're a from Jew kit, assembly required. It's all the pieces they need, and they can actually make you exactly how you want because you don't come with your own family traditions. Right. So it's an easy melding. I think we could reframe it that way, Scott.
I have to tell you that what I really like is, I like the notion that's always explained to me that how a relationship is between a husband and a wife, with the explanation of there being like a ladder. The woman is at the top of the ladder, the man is at the bottom, and the relationship between husband and wife is the man is striving to get to the level of holiness as the woman, and the woman is working to make sure that the man doesn't fall. I've always loved that concept. So whether someone is FFB, BT, LMNOP, no matter what they are, it's a constant theme that I like very much. And so, you're talking about, and I love the spiritual explanation of what ends up happening when a man and woman come together, the joining of their neshamas to become one soul. The spiritual aspect of that I absolutely love. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's the emes. And so, what I'm looking to do when I'm dating is to find someone who I can put at the top of the ladder and look to go and strive, someone who I can grow with. And so when it comes to someone who's always been observant, it comes down to, or if it's someone who's always been observant, or if it's someone if she's a Baal Teshuvah in her own right. I'm just looking for someone who I can end up going and partnering with to be able to go and grow spiritually. All of us are always on a path of growth. Nobody ever is supposed to stay stagnant, as you've mentioned many times on this podcast. So I'm looking for, when it comes to getting married, I'm looking to be able to go and grow with somebody. And it doesn't matter to me what their background is or their level of observance, if it's something which they've always known, or if it's something which they discovered, like myself and like you, later on in life.
So if you are a single woman and you're looking to meet an incredibly beautiful, sweet, smart, intelligent man, you can email me at presidenttorchweb.org. Operators are standing by. Okay, so that is one of the challenges that can come up. So that's I think that's good for people to know. But like every challenge, the more the challenge, the more the blessing that comes as a result of it.
Something else, it is worth mentioning, Dan, that I have to tell you, it's always very nice in this community, as you're very nice to exaggerate a little bit, as you were saying about everybody loves Scott. I will tell you, though, I think what it is, I speak to a lot of people in the community here, and I think that there is, and this is the wonderful part and the wonderful welcoming feeling that I always get, I think you've mentioned as well, that you get here, is there's a great, people really embrace Baalei Teshuvah here. So even though I'm not with my family, you've heard me mention earlier that I'm not with my family during the Chagim or Shabbos or times like that. There's certain things I have to end up giving up. The community here very much embraces Baalei Teshuvah and has with me. And so I have kind of reciprocated that. It's a very warm feeling. And I found that people who have been observant their whole life find it fascinating. They ask the very questions that you've been asking at the very beginning. What was the motivating factor? Like, why would you, why did you choose to actually end up doing this? And it goes so far to even go and say, I remember going and having a conversation with Rabbi Wolbe about the fact that I was driving home late one night and I was driving by McDonald's and man, it smelled good. And I was really hungry and I hadn't eaten dinner. And I felt the temptation to just drive through, not a big deal. I'll just get a fish sandwich and just whatever, fine. And I didn't. I went home, and I felt good that I didn't. And Rabbi Wolbe said to me, he said, I really admire that. He said, I don't know what it's like to have that temptation. He's never had McDonald's, but most people that live in this community haven't. They haven't had those same things which we grew up on. And in a sense, it's almost like because you have so many wonderful people who are always looking to do as many mitzvahs as possible. And in a sense, it's really funny, but ironically, it's almost like a little bit of jealousy in a good way that we have the opportunity, because we are really tempted by our Yetzer Hara to go and partake of these things that we used to all the time. But they don't have that. There's no frame of reference there. And it kind of goes in the morning prayers. I always think it's very interesting when we're saying the morning prayers in the morning. And of course, you get to the one point there it says, thank you, God, for not making me a woman. And of course, a woman says, thank you for making me as I am. And I never fully understood that. And it was explained to me that the reason why we actually end up going and saying, thank you, God, for not making me a woman, is that women are naturally more holy than men. And basically what it's saying is, thank you, Hashem, for giving me extra obligation. I have to work harder to get to that point. So putting that in context with regard to the challenges that we have, in a sense, I have a feeling that there are people in the community here who know the fact that we have a lot of temptations out here that we're constantly striving to overcome. Sometimes we fall. That's okay. But we know that, but if you don't know any of these sort of temptations outside, or any of these challenges, everything from something from like eating just a McDonald's hamburger, right, then you don't ever have that temptation to want to partake of that. But so it just comes down to, it's just kind of, I think, worth mentioning. I think that's what it is. It's interesting. It's the same way I get When I speak at the synagogue, and I go davening, I see gerim, or future gers, people who are looking to convert, or even especially those who already who have converted, who've undergone a full process, a full kosher conversion. I'm always fascinated, and I want to go and ask, so why? How, you're getting, because I think that everything becomes perspective. Yeah. So people in this community will look at people who are Baalei Teshuvah and say, wow, so where did you, blah, blah, blah. But, I still have a Jewish family, but I look to people who have become gers, and I think to myself, wow, what was the motivating factor for you to, in many cases, completely leave your family and everything that you know to really become a fully observant Jew? I find it inspiring. And this is why I was going to say, with regard to you and to your family as well, it's really absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it is. I learned something interesting that, space and time exist here, but in the heavens, like we talked about getting closer to God, there's no distance. So it's not like we can shift our locale and get closer to God. You get closeness comes from likeness. So I've known that for a while, and that's how we get close to God, by being in His image, and the way He operates with us in this world is the way we operate with others, and that brings that closeness. However, what I learned just the other week for Shabbos is that time, there's no time, but what's being measured is change. So the amount of change someone is making is what is creating a progression forward. So the more someone's moved, the more of an impact it has on the heavens. And you're right, like it's not even like a crappy McDonald's sandwich, right? It's just like, for one, they never experienced a drive-through. You just drive through, you order, and they pulled in, you're like a pig eating it in your car. Like, they would never eat in their car like that. They sit down and they say a bracha and eat like a civilized human being. But they never experienced just some of those conveniences, and they are very difficult to give up. So, Scott, any other parting words, some words of wisdom for someone who's beginning the process? Again, as I explained in the beginning, there's challenges that are going to come your way, but they're going to be different for you than what they are for me or what they were for Scott. But the idea here is that they are just circumstances being created to help mold and shape us and bring us closer to God. Is there any other advice you would give to someone who's beginning the process, Scott?
In beginning the process, more than anything else, it's important to have a good rabbi, someone who is someone who you can confide in, someone who can empathize with you. If there are other people who are beginning the journey, other Baalei Teshuvahs as well, you have that camaraderie and support. I think that's very, very helpful and very, very important. And as you're going through the process, really the most important thing, and I will tell you, this is a bit of advice that you've given me about the importance of clinging to Torah during the day. I do find it very helpful. It's a bit of advice that you mentioned to me about making sure to cling to Torah and studying that whenever you're feeling frustrated, which you're going to feel along the way, to understand that these feelings are normal and that everybody has them. And I still have them. I know you still have them. It happens all the time. But to cling to Torah in whatever way it is, or whatever learning, whatever avenues we choose. I read a lot of Miam Loez. I like to kind of delve into all aspects of Torah, Talmud, Midrash, Mishnah. So for me, I know that you yourself, you're studying halacha, and I know that was Zohar, all these things which you dabbled in. But of course, by going and reading this and connecting this there, it's a feeling, it's an automatic connection towards something higher and towards that sense of purpose. And to realize that when all is said and done, I think what it does is, with patience comes perspective. And as long as you take a deep breath and realize that what you're doing is right, surround yourself with the right people as you're going through the process. Understand that not everybody understands what you're doing, and accept that. Don't try to convince people who don't want to listen to what you're doing. Just as you're going to ask people to respect the choices that you're making, as hard as it is sometimes, you need to respect that not everybody is going to be open to the new direction in which you're moving. And these are all things which I've had to learn. In some cases, I learned the hard way. The hard way. It's very interesting because I forgot what it's called, but people become many times when they start learning something new, no matter what it is, they want to share it with everybody. They want everybody to go and have that same level of excitement because they're learning something new. They want other people to feel that too. And I know within the first year of me beginning this journey, I was trying to throw books in front of people, and that's when you started getting the pushback. And that's part of the...
Great advice. I had the same experience. I was so excited. I was wanting to share with my family. And there was a very important Kabbalistic concept that just like there's that proper balance between Hesed and Gevurah that you have to have with each individual, also with how much information you're giving and how you're giving that information. And you have to know whether the person's open to it. If they're not, it's going to come across the wrong way. Great advice, Scott. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your stories, your advice. I think they were very meaningful, and I think that it was all messaging that I think is going to help out anyone that's beginning this amazing journey, amazing endeavor to becoming Torah observant and becoming closer to God. So thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Steve.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting Torch so they can continue to spread Torah wisdom to the world by making a donation at torchweb.org and clicking donate in the top right corner of the page. And if you would like to get in contact with our host with comments, suggestions for future topics of learning, or questions for him or his guest rabbis, you may email him at president@torchweb.org.